Somewhere between a hotel and a lease agreement lives a market that most landlords completely ignore, and if you own a furnished place within 20 minutes of a major hospital, you might be sitting on a gold mine without even knowing it. Traveling nurses are flooding cities across the country, assigned to 13-week contracts, and they need a real home, not a vending machine breakfast and a parking lot view. Here is the weird part about pricing this kind of rental. You cannot just copy what your neighbor charges for a long-term lease, because traveling nurses are not paying out of pocket the way a regular tenant would. Most of them receive a housing stipend from their staffing agency, and that stipend is calculated based on the GSA per diem rate for your city, which is basically the government's best guess at what housing costs in your area. The GSA rate is public information, and you should absolutely look it up for your zip code before you ever post a listing. In 2024, some metro areas near major medical centers had per diem housing rates pushing over $150 a night, which adds up fast when you multiply that across a 13-week contract. Now, proximity to the hospital is not just a nice selling point, it is basically your pricing lever. A nurse working a 12-hour overnight shift does not want to drive 45 minutes home at 6 in the morning, so the closer you are, the more you can reasonably charge without anyone blinking. Think of it like a coffee shop pricing strategy, except instead of being near a train station, you are near a trauma center. Units within 5 miles of the hospital can often command 15 to 25% more than comparable furnished rentals sitting 10 or 15 miles out in the suburbs. You also need to factor in what furnished actually means to someone who just drove across 3 states with 2 suitcases and a stethoscope. A bed frame with no mattress, a pot, and a wobbly bar stool is not furnished in the traveling nurse world. Fully furnished means a real bed, full kitchen setup, reliable Wi-Fi fast enough to stream and do telehealth, and blackout curtains because night shift workers treat 10 in the morning like it is midnight. Utilities and internet should almost always be bundled into your rate, because nurses on short contracts do not want to set up and cancel a dozen accounts in 13 weeks. When you include everything in one monthly number, you become dramatically easier to book than the landlord who is still asking people to call the electric company separately like it is 2004. A fair way to land on your monthly number is to start with the nightly GSA rate for your area, multiply it by 30, and then adjust up or down based on your actual amenities, parking situation, and distance from the hospital. If the math spits out something like $3,200 a month and your unit genuinely delivers on comfort and convenience, that is not gouging, that is meeting the market where it already lives. Staffing agencies sometimes give nurses a lump sum housing stipend up front, and the nurse keeps whatever they do not spend, so a nurse hunting for housing is often motivated to find something at or under their budget ceiling. This is actually great news for you as a landlord, because you are not competing with the cheapest listing in town. You are competing for the sweet spot that feels like a smart deal to someone who is also trying to pocket a little of that stipend. One thing landlords get wrong constantly is underpricing a great location because they are still anchored to what they charged their last long-term tenant. Your cousin paying $800 a month in 2019 is not a relevant data point when a hospital down the street is importing clinical staff every quarter and those staff members have a dedicated housing budget. Platforms like Furnished Finder exist specifically for this market, and listing there signals to nurses and their agencies that you actually understand how the system works. Airbnb and VRBO can work too, but the traveling nurse crowd often books through channels tied directly to their agency's housing coordinator, so being visible in the right places matters as much as your price. It also helps to understand the difference between a 30-day stay and a 90-day stay when setting your rate, because most landlords discount slightly for longer bookings and nurses expect that flexibility. Offering a small reduction for a full 13-week contract compared to month is a totally reasonable move that makes your listing look professional and negotiation-friendly. Do not forget to check local short-term rental ordinances before you get too excited, because some cities cap furnished rental pricing or require specific permits for stays under a certain number of days. A quick call to your city's housing office, or even just reading your municipality's rental code online, can save you from a painful surprise 6 months into your new side hustle. If you get the pricing right, the location right, and the setup right, traveling nurses become some of the most reliable short-term tenants you will ever find. They are there for a job, they show up on schedule, and they leave on schedule, which is more than most landlords can say about anyone else. The market is real, the demand is growing, and your furnished unit near a major medical center might be one listing away from filling itself on a rotating basis all year long. Want to learn more about how we can help you level up your rental strategy from the ground up? Go ahead and check out our links in the description.